You're writing a fantasy story, as so many people do, but you thought maybe I'll throw something into the mix. A new lingo, language, dialect, something to really set your story apart from everybody else's, where they just speak plain old English or whatever the vernacular is from where you're from. Can you do it? Can you do it right? Attack on Table. Welcome to Attack on Table, where Ryan and I sit down and very incautiously discuss with one another, taking into account zero feelings, only facts, and mostly just opinions. But this is what we do, talking the craft of writing.
Yeah, and if you guys like what we're doing on here, but you want to see us do something more professional, be nicer to people other than ourselves, check out our author interviews on our channel. I'm guessing now is when you ask me what we're
Usually
doing.
it takes you 6 years to finish saying something. You've caught me off guard. I've been taken.
Well, I have been
surprise.
warned that we have limited time.
Huh.
You've been taken by surprise.
Surprise. Okay.
Yeah, so tonight we're talking about languages, writing them. Should you, if you do, what some good things, bad things about doing that in your fantasy and or sci-fi? I guess we'll include that in there.
Yeah. I suppose you could work in like a new made-up language into any genre, but I would say it's probably the most prevalent in fantasy and sci-fi, where you're meeting other races that most of the time don't exist. And I would kick it off by just saying that I agree that it does add a unique flair to whatever story you want to write, if it's done well. And the caveat we always wind up using on this.
Yeah, it can also be a bad thing. I think anything can be overdone. I do think languages. I agree with you that languages in a story can make the world feel lived in. It makes it feel more real. We all kind of want to relive that vein that grandfather Tolkien created for us all those years ago. But we're all not nearly as experted as he is.
Yeah, Tolkien wrote a story around the language he made up, and then I guess wrote a few more languages to go with it so that everybody gets one, including English, oddly enough. Otherwise, nobody would have been able to read his books. But I might be a hot take. I'd venture to say that going to that length, to being like a language you can actually learn to speak fluently, and writing something like that for your story feels like overkill nowadays. That I feel like the language was a life's passion that translated to a fantasy story. I don't think that you necessarily. I believe that you'd be really stretching the amount of time it takes you to create your story if you went that far writing something today. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, creating a language whole cloth is that's an endeavor, and I think if that is your passion and you want to write a fantasy story, then yeah, you should definitely delve into that. I think the more of that stuff that exists, the cooler fantasy and sci-fi can become. I mean, like, look at Klingon, like that became a whole thing, and now people can speak that and stuff, and that's kind of a cool little niche. But I think if you don't have those skill sets, you should you shouldn't venture too far into those woods. I think that's a good way to saying it. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't. I have languages in my story, but I don't delve too deeply into it because I'm not a master of that stuff. I'm not highly educated in creating my own languages, so I kind of just sprinkle it here or there for a sense of grounding, but not. I'm not trying to write full on speeches in it, you know.
sure. The argument gets made sometimes with languages in specifically like fantasy. That like if you're gonna make a language, make it do something. It could be a plot device to where you got to speak in the wizarding language of Harry Potter to get a spell to happen. You can't just say explode. You have to say what was it, bombardo or something. I don't know. It's been too long, but there's a special word and it ain't English. Avada Kedavra instead of just pointing the wand and saying die fast.
Yeah,
Like,
instant death. I think that's a key. A key to it is something that's used repeatedly, and that gives the audience a chance to memorize it or at least like key into it. That that's what that word has some meaning and some sense. If you're just looking for languages, personally, as a writer who likes to read, I don't really get into reading people's fantasy languages as though like I should have a base knowledge of what that language, as though I don't need subtitles. That kind of pulls me out pretty quick
yeah.
because I'm just like, well, what the hell they say? Like I don't know that language.
And you're not going to race over to the appendix to give yourself a little crash course in the dialect to really like fully understand it. And as most people know, other languages structure sentences differently. Enunciation goes on strange places as far as like from an English speaker to going somewhere like say Chinese. And those are all things that if the language that you're creating is vastly different from English, and if it's a fantasy race or if it's an alien race in a sci-fi, it probably should be like there's a lot of thought that goes into that, and that's really, I would say, like the biggest drawback for me as far as like trying to create any real substantive and maybe consistent language where I have to have rules about it to determine how I'm going to write it and everything, is it takes a lot of work, a lot of time to put it together, and for something that I would bet a majority of the readers are never going to care about. So where's the return on investment there? And I don't, other than, a line or two or maybe a magic word, I don't understand personally why it's a very necessary thing. It would just be more of a personal choice of, ooh, I want that in my story.
I'm also of the belief that what Tolkien did was akin to magic in its own right, because he created languages, and like you said, he created the language before he created the story. So this is probably what helped. But he created these languages that fit the personality of the species or race or region in which it is spoken, and that's something I feel like a lot of people don't key into all that well. Like they're just like, I'm just going to create a language, and it doesn't really fit the people speaking it. Whereas like what Tolkien did, Elvish sounds Elven.
Yeah.
The black tongue sounds dark and dreadful.
Just the angriest Russian, like, like, I don't know. I only speak English.
Hold on, don't be casting spells here, Sean.
All right. But
calm down.
And we give Tolkien a lot of credit, in our talks and everything, as the big grandfather of fantasy and everything like that, but there's a lot of writers out there that have made their, like, at least parts of a language that have been inserted into their fantasy, their sci-fi, whatever. There's the uh let me think. Dune, the language that's spoken by the Fremen, and it's sort of like an offshoot almost of Arabic dialects, if I'm not mistaken. C.S. Lewis, I said Frank Herbert, and Frank Herbert has more than just the Fremen's language and everything, depending on what species he's depending on what group of people he's talking to. But there's a long, long list of authors that have been out there that at least created partial languages. But I think and let me throw this out there as a potential point of argument. I think that rather than having to create a translated word for every word you would ever have somebody say, is maybe you come up with rules of your language, certain idioms that go with certain words and things, or I don't even know if idiom's the right word, but a portion of a word, like a sh noise being in your word for stick, also should be maybe involved in your word for tree, kind of thing. And having those rules would be able to kind of help guide you as you insert that language into your story without necessarily having to devote a ton of time to creating, the language. And it's not just with the words, but how the sentences flow and things like that.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I think I personally, I think like the way mouthfeel is, and some basic understanding, like if you saw a word you could kind of understand what the word is, maybe through repeated context or something like that. I feel like those are strong indicators for good language. But I don't know, it's so hard. Like I'll just be honest, like I got a D in Spanish, so like understanding languages is not my forte. But I definitely prefer things that like I can look at and kind of get an understanding of what it sounds like. That's me personally. I know there's a lot of writers out there that just kind of go hog wild with it, and you're looking at it, you go, I don't even know like how to begin. Like um, Patrick Rothfuss, like he famously named his main character something that can't even, like, it's so hard to pronounce because it's like a K. It has like a KQ sound in the beginning, and it's like quoth. And so it's like, but it doesn't really look like that's how it. It's so weird, but like stuff like that, I feel like kind of stops a reader. This is just my opinion. Like, of course, not every reader is going to have this. Every reader is going to be different. But for me, it stops me when I have to sit there and like struggle to look at a word. I don't want to abandon your effort as a writer and just like blow past it and be like, well, that's Qdoba. Yep, that's Qdoba. He's our main character. And he rides the Shadowland or something. I just come up with my own words. I don't want to waste your effort as a writer doing that. So it stops me. It stops me in my tracks. I'm like struggling to look at it. And how is this pronounced? Is there something in the back of the book that explains it?
Yep.
And that's a big negative for me when I'm reading.
Yeah.
Anything that stops me in my tracks.
One of the first people I ever interviewed in this channel was a young lady by the name of Tahani Nelson, who had her Fai chronicles, and she had a main character that was a part of a different, like, subset of humans, offshoot, more like Fae than humans, and they had a few words and names for things, more so than they did phrases. But I actually read her whole book, not realizing that there was a glossary with pronunciations in the back of the book until I finished it. I was like, oh, I've been saying it wrong the entire time, which that's my fault, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying having a little bit of help for the reader isn't a bad thing, but I think she did a great job of not leaning into it so hard that it was something I had to struggle with. It's kind of like what you said, Ryan, about like, oh, I made my own pronunciation for it, and it didn't really interrupt the story after I did that. I don't even remember what it what I was pronouncing it in my head as I was reading it, but it was wrong. Um, but I think that that's like a great baseline is doing stuff like that, and you can have a different language where you only kind of dip your toe in the water with it a little bit, just to give that depth of culture and everything in your story with your hellos, goodbyes, couple cuss words, um, important phrases that will anybody could say in any given point, or at least that culture's meaning for it. Um, like, you could have this species with their magical lingo's way of saying it happens. Maybe they don't say exactly that, but they might have a way of saying it in their own native language. I don't think that that's much of a stretch. But again, I don't think that any author should spend a great amount of time on it unless you are doing it for yourself. I did see that advice when I was researching this topic a little bit, saying don't do it for the author, do it for the reader. Do it for you if you want to. But if most of your language is K's and Q's, you might have gone too far.
Yeah, I think personally, I don't think it's a bad thing to necessarily lean on the ignorance of the people of your world, so that you can help abate some of the ignorance of your reader. Like I have in the fantasy that Sean loves to keep bringing up that I haven't finished writing. I've got a race of beings that are essentially like crocodile folk, like alligator folk, and they have their own language that just sounds like a bunch of chomps and clicks because that's they don't really have lips and things like that. So their language comes out that way, and most people don't understand it, and that's by design. But I like that aspect because I know the reader. There's no way for me to really express to the reader how to read what it is they're saying because it's just going to be a lot of clicks and clacks and sounds. There's no way to really convey that in a language that they could write, let alone speak themselves.
Sure.
So like what I do is I just kind of lean into the ignorance of that race goes to market, and they do this, and who knows what they're saying, but like they have to rely on a lot of like hand motions of like this, this is two kind of thing, and there's a lot of room for misinterpretation in there, which again they use to their advantage to get good or better deals.
Did you just say gooder?
I did say gooder, because they understand what they're saying, but they can't like communicate that back in a spoken way, and so it's saves room for that. But I also like give the room for the other characters in the scene to act as the audience, going, "What is this?" or get some kind of interpretation, so that like it feels like, oh, I'm not the only one not in the know. And I do see like a lot of fantasy stuff where people just kind of like, oh, they're speaking this language. I know that language. I am Groot. All that stuff. And
yeah, I think that that's a really good way to almost get away with making the language undeciphered, so you don't have to worry so much about what it is having somebody interpret it. Maybe there's one person who can interpret it for the rest of your characters, so that they can kind of guide the readers into what exactly is getting translated. Because if the language itself isn't doing anything for your story, or like what is being like, the fact that it's a different language doesn't matter, it's just what the character is trying to convey, then I mean, I wouldn't worry too much. Insert a translator who can kind of explain it to your characters and then move along, especially if it's only meant to be a smaller part of the story and not like one of your main characters. So
well, that's what I love about Star Wars.
What?
Is like this in Star Wars, the alien races or the robots, they just do what they do. Like they're just speaking whatever language they speak. And then the English speaking person just replies in a way that would inform the audience. They're not even like telling you what the person said, they're just responding to it in a way that you're like, okay, I get the message.
Yeah,
And
and
that's clever.
that's a lot easier to do in a visual medium like a television show or whatever. And but like you could almost bypass that other language entirely in a sci-fi story just by, having if it's a discovered language from a known species and everything, your super futuristic version of Google Translate in your earbud or something. Like Peter Quill in Guardians of the Galaxy. In those comic books, like the reason he can communicate with everybody, they're not all speaking English. He has a translator in his helmet, I believe. So I think that I think sci-fi probably has it the easiest with getting around that kind of a language barrier. You could have that thing break, and then all of a sudden your team of people can't understand each other. That would be a fun little exercise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as far as fantasy and everything goes, I would probably stick to my guns of the general, like the way I kind of think about my stories is if it doesn't really have anything to do with the plot, then it probably shouldn't be given a whole lot of time. Some, sure, for the depth of world feel, the alternate cultures in your world and everything like that, but I wouldn't let it be anything you stress and pore over and spend 400 hours, constructing or anything. Not even anywhere close that much. Not even a tenth of that time. Get your story written and everything, and fiddle with it afterwards, so that it all feels like it is one cohesive language when you speak it out loud, and then call it good. That's just where I live, though.
Well, hey, if you guys are out there writing your own languages for fantasy or sci-fi, and you think Sean and I got some things right, got some things wrong, let us know. How long did it take you? How much energy do you feel like you poured into it? What's some cool ways that you use to implement it to help the reader, stay invested? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys. But I think Sean and I are pretty much done talking about it. There's not a lot of meat on the languages in fantasy bone. But,
Yeah. Yeah, I think I said everything I wanted to say, but you had mentioned we got a somebody wrote in with a Dear Duncan.
Oh yeah,
correct?
Yeah, we have a Dear Duncan. So let's go ahead and jump to the Dear Duncan studio.
Alrighty.
Well, from by the power of the internet and
Oh,
our friends at NJC Printing, if you guys like our overlays here, check them out. They can create a bunch of stuff for you, especially if you're trying to do a book signing. They can do signage and stuff for you guys. But yeah, we have a Dear Duncan. This one is anonymous, so unfortunately we don't know who it's from, and they didn't really give us too much to reach out to him so we could try to get him on the show. But I'm going to go ahead and start reading. Dear Duncan, an editor told me to kill my darlings. After reviewing my manuscript, I discovered that nearly everything I enjoyed writing qualifies as a darling. What am I supposed to have left when this process is over? Well,
scorched earth.
I think I feel so. I'll go ahead and start this. I feel like it's a misunderstanding of what a darling is. You're not supposed to kill everything that you enjoy in your writing. Just kill the ones that don't belong, or set them aside for a different story that maybe they do belong in.
And if you think everything belongs, you're probably incorrect. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sure you could lose like maybe 10%, 5 to 10%, and still feel satisfied with your work.
I've heard of darlings being like much more. It could be settings. It could be events and everything like that. Anything that you show a lot of favoritism to, and that's great that you put the effort into it, but all good things must come to an end. And what is that quote? I would have it make such an end. Like, do something cool with it. And if it's a character and they've run their course, their arc is finished, and the story doesn't need them anymore, then you invent an afterlife and you send them to it.
So this is what I would do. If that's all they told you to do is just kill your darlings, that's, in my opinion, a piss poor editor. They should probably explain to you why that thing doesn't belong where it's at, and maybe give you some room for some follow-up questions as to, like, how can I really want to keep this in there? How can I make it a part of the story so that it belongs better?
Yeah, vital.
That's my stance on it. That's really vague advice.
Yeah, I'll play editor's advocate. They probably, there's the possibility, since you didn't come on the show, Anonymous, probably did give a reason why you don't need a lot of your darlings and everything. You maybe just didn't like any of them. And if you did, let me say that over. If they did give you the reasons why they don't belong and you should kill them off, or just remove them from your story, then you have everything you need to do exactly what Ryan just said. You have the things that make your darlings irrelevant to the story you're telling, so change them. Again, just being editor's advocate here, if you really did only remove anyone and anything from the story that you enjoyed writing, that is I hope you did not pay much for the editor.
Seek a new editor.
Yeah.
That person clearly just wants you to be miserable in life.
Yeah. Did you do beta reading before you went to the editor, or are you waiting to send it to beta readers? Getting another opinion from somebody who may not cost you any money might not hurt. Like, and you could tell them, like, does this particular darling feel unnecessary to you after reading the story, and see what they say. Like, you're not forced.
All of this is very good reasons why people should come on. Like, they should ask to be on the show, not just send. Like, we appreciate you guys sending the questions. At least, try to come on so we can offer better assistance. It's really hard on just a vague question.
Well, it's not even just better assistance, it's better context.
Yeah.
I love that we do this. I do. It's just, we like to ask questions when we can and get a bigger, broader picture of what's going on here. And we do feel like we'd be more useful to you folks if you come on the show. You're welcome on. You can stay for as long as you want to. Let's have a talk. Well, I don't feel like we come off too preachy or mean to anybody except each other.
Yeah, and
that
who
won't
knows?
Change.
Maybe your editor's right. We don't know the full story, so maybe you're a hoarder of good
darlings.
ideas. Yeah, want them all in your
whole bunch of darlings locked in your basement. You won't get rid of any of them.
Darling kidnapper.
Darling napper.
Ugh.
You're not anonymous. I know you now.
Yeah, Miss Annie Moose.
The Willisville darling napper.
All right, well, hopefully that was helpful to someone.
Sorry that you kind of bore the wrath of everybody who came before you and didn't come on this show.
Yeah, we're much better in person, I think, hopefully. We're nicer to you than we are to ourselves. So yeah, come on. I think I got one final question here, Sean.
Okay.
Do we have time for it? Do we have time for this one question?
I suppose.
How do we end these?
Linguistically.